Welcome to Merchman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, hear all the factors in how we place varieties on your farm for the best yield. Check out the 2022 MS Tech summary data below in the description that Ben mentions. And we have a market update from Turk.
Welcome to this week's episode of Merchman Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we have Turk and Lynn. Lynn, what are the sales managers doing right now? What is the life of a sales manager and how are they helping our customers?
Yeah, so right now we are to the point, we're pretty hot and heavy into the sales season. Harvest is wrapped up. Guys have done their in-field evaluations of our old products. They're looking at some data that we provided on some of the new stuff. So where we're at right now is basically putting together the package for the farmer and going through what we're going to move forward with for the next year. So a little bit what I guess I wanted to go over is the method to the madness when it comes to, as we get tasked as sales managers to sit down with dealers and visit with the individual farmers on what's kind of the chain of events that we look at or the checklist that we kind of check off as we go through and determination of how we put varieties where. The biggest one, we like to start with is just a multi-variety, multi-maturity package that bodes well with the environment and the yield goals for the farmer. So when we mean that is that we don't want to put everything into one basket. Here in Southeast Iowa, we run from anywhere from a 2.8 to a 4.3, so we have a big range when it comes to the varieties of that. But sometimes beans can respond to different weather patterns. There might be a disease issue that a certain one maybe struggles against. So that's why we start with that different variety package. So when we look at that, the first thing when I sit down with farmers, everyone has their yield goal in their head, and I think too many times we start with the yield goal and then try to pick varieties that look good on test plots that say, Kennedy's top 3 or Monroe is, we see that out there and like, I want that one. We kind of have to take a step back a little bit. Let's look at the fields. What are our limiting factors in the fields? Is it disease? Is it fertility? Is it environment? When I say environment, low water holding capacity. Is it in a spot where, historically, you just don't catch rain? That gives us a deeper dive into where our variety placements goes at that point, or narrows up, I guess, our lineup. So then I'll kind of take another step back, and then I'll look at the bean variety. I know the maturity, we know the limiting factors, start looking at varieties, what matches up well in this situation, and then we start placing from that standpoint. And then I look at the yield goals. So if we have a piece of ground, flat black, Phytophthora is not an issue. We're looking to, extend that yield goal for the farm. In this area, I'd be leaning on the Kennedy and the Truman, something that has a lot of feet underneath it. But then as we pull back to, maybe it's a farm like our farm where water holding capacity is limited. My top end yield goal is probably not what the rest of the counties is for that part of the county. So I pull something and go back a little more defensive, maybe run with a Monroe, and on the river bottoms, maybe I try to sprinkle in some Kennedys when we go there. So there's a method to the madness when it comes to that. Every sales manager, every dealer is maybe just a little bit different on how we get there, but our process and our results are the same. And I think what makes it really fun about being here at Merchman's and having our portfolio is we can put together a really good 2, 3, 4 variety package for a farmer and really maximize the acres that are going out there.
You want to hit on, Turk, just a little bit why we spread that risk from early to late?
I like to ask when you want to be done combining, because if we're trying to recommend some varieties that might be a fuller to the fuller side for them, and they're saying, I really want to be done combining by this date, then that shifts us forward a little bit. But I think the most important thing is to make sure you're working with somebody that understands your farm and when you want to start combining and when you want to be done combining, because the maturity of the soybeans, that whether it be a 2.1 or a 2.7, there's 5 or 6 days difference there that is in the maturity. And so when you start combining early, and if you can spread out your risk and move fuller, then your beans are always going to be maturing as the combine is getting there. So I like to always ask, how long does it take you to combine your soybeans? And that tells me the spread on the maturity that I would recommend. But our yield data that we have on the website now is, our sales managers all understand the varieties for the area, and they know what's been working and what isn't working where. And so I would highly recommend to make sure you're working with the sales manager and the dealer that understands your farm.
Correct. One of the things I guess that I kind of look at too is if you are pushing your from a spectrum standpoint, if you're pushing towards the earlier side of that spectrum, I have a tendency to like to push if you want an early bean to go out and capture yield with, I have a tendency to put those on the best water holding capacity ground versus the lighter soil types, because that bean won't be as stressed for or aborting as many flowers or pods in that time frame, because the water holding capacity is higher than what a lighter soil type would be. So I have a tendency on the best dirt to be placing the earlier varieties, and on the tail end of that, around here we get away with planting 4.0s extremely successfully on some lighter, more marginal dirt, because we know that inevitably we're going to catch a shower end of August, first part of September that really can carry those trimmings in Norfolks as well.
I think that's been a really successful operation here in Southeast Iowa, is that maybe that Austin or that Norfolk doesn't win every year, but we've been able to position it that it doesn't, we don't run into any difference maybe between, at worst, we're a difference between a 3.6 and a 4.0, but on the year that we get that September rain, it really pulls our average up. And that's, once again, back to when we talk about a yield goal, each field is very, very important to carrying that. So when we go and talk with everybody, and we're looking at that, we're breaking it down by what your enterprise maybe yield goal is, but we get there by building the foundation one field at a time, and then at the end we put ourselves in the most successful position.
Yep. I mean, and not only from Southeast Iowa, we can stretch that later season varieties. This year was one of the first years that our new Memphis and even our old Memphis, both the 22 and the 23 series Memphis, yielded extremely well as you moved further south, because of the drought that they were experiencing, the tougher conditions they were experiencing. The past 3 years prior to this, it seems like it's been a mid-group 3 soybean game south of Interstate 70, and down there for the first time, and this is the first time in 3 years that the mid to late group 4s are definitely hanging on and yielding the way they're supposed to. And that's that whole risk versus reward game that you're playing, because the mid group 3s might have only been running in the mid 50s, and some of them late group 4s are now bumping the 60-65 field averages, and that's all part about the risk mitigation, where spread that risk out. And we have high yielding varieties all the way from a 1.2 to a 4.9, and they all have their own place. And I pride myself, and our sales managers pride themselves on how well they know how to place those soybean varieties.
So Ben, you might comment on the fact that there used to be the more full season you planted, the higher the yield potential was. But we're seeing some of these early varieties yielding in the 90s, 85 and 90. So the larger farmers that have to get started earlier and run longer and harder, they're not giving up what they used to give up with those earlier varieties.
Right, and I think that's a testament to a lot of our beans having moderate plant structure. So what I mean by that is they're not inline beans and they're not full bush beans. They have the ability to adapt and spread their yield to auxiliary branches. There's been a lot of work in the breeding to really bring up stress tolerances, to bring up disease tolerances, to bring a bean that traditionally isn't a 2.0 is traditionally a half a point to a full point earlier than what they're normally running. They can bring that down to handle more heat, more stress, and have better disease tolerances, all those things. And that's what builds that yield base.
Yep, we're seeing that across the board.
Correct. And that's why I like to position those earlier varieties on the better soil types, because they see a little bit less stress. They have the ability to fill pods, and they don't abort as many flowers because they can get through that time frame where it's dry, because they're pulling from the reserves, the soil water reserves that they have there, and they have the ability to finish off where, you know, mid group 3 might be smacked right in the middle.
And I would say for most of our coverage area, maybe short of you know, that Wisconsin, Northern Iowa segment this year, but for the most part, everyone experiences some sort of adverse drought or heat in that June and July standpoint. And yeah, I mean, if our whole portfolio was stuck in that realm, we're putting ourselves in a pretty serious deficit. Because this year we saw here, Kennedy's held a really good yield, but we had that really hot June, and we just didn't get the flower development. It compensated well. We had a really good weight, but it just got caught in that weird window where we didn't get the fullest potential out of them, but we did very well. And then here, you know, our Truman and our Austins did absolutely phenomenal, because they just were kind of laying in wait, I guess you'd say, for lack of better terms. But it's just somewhere throughout the growing season, no matter where our coverage area is at, we're going to have some form of stress, and it's just a matter of managing that stress. And the crystal ball would be, tell me that if you're going to have that stress in June or you're going to have it in August, we place this perfect all day and everyone's happy. But unfortunately, Mother Nature likes to throw some curveballs at us. So,
correct.
Soybean plant's pretty adaptable. It can flex on population. It can flex on the number of flowers and pods. It can flex on the bean size. And so there are 3 ways that soybean plant can flex. So you'd say our soybeans are full flex bin.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that's a testament to the breeding as well, because the breeding program has allowed those to continue to be able to flex in that situation. So to recap that, Lynn, we look at disease.
Yep.
So predominant disease issues, whether that be white mold, sudden death, Phytophthora, whatever. First thing is disease. What's the second on the list?
So we look at disease that would go back to the limiting factor of the bean, you know, the bean variety or the bean segment. So when we look at the maturity zone, we'll start pulling out beans that don't fit that limiting factor on the field size of it.
So like water holding capacity, racehorse versus more of a
Correct,
workhorse
correct.
style bean. So
Yep.
that's the second thing we look at, and then the third would be
what's the yield goal?
Yep.
Or outcome, I guess we should say. The goal is always as high as possible, but there is a limit to like what Turk was talking about. If we're going to plant an earlier variety, maybe we're going to give up a little bit on the top end, but we still want to keep that in a very competitive mindset, because we need the yield to pay the bills. So
that's absolutely correct. So good notes on that. I just wanted to share a couple quick things here. We have this 2022 MS Tech summary data. So basically I go through and I looked at how everybody's win percentages, and that's not really a win percentage, it's a yield over mean. Mm-hmm. So percent over mean, how everything turned out, and things turned out extremely well. We have a very, very solid class. The 23 series from the 1-2 to the 1-5, the Saturn, Mercury, Neptune are 101.6, 103.9, 106.3, respectively between each one of those varieties. Extremely high yielding products there. We're seeing some nice things out of the brand new Chippewas. The 23 series Chippewas are 103.5 over test average. We had a 3.1 experimental that we will have a full launch in for the 24 sales season. It actually has a name that we will be introducing, the Lincoln, in the 24 sales season. It's 105.4. Really excited about that. Kennedy rolled in at 109.5.
Wow.
Fine wine.
Yep. It just keeps getting better with age. That's not typically the case, but the Kennedy's an absolutely solid product our customers should be looking at. The Monroe rolled in at 105.5. The Truman was 104.2. We have a 3.9 experimental that rolled out that we'll have for the 24 sales season. Looks and acts a lot like the Eisenhower, so it's probably going to carry an Eisenhower name. It's 103.5. As we get a little bit further into some of the new products for the Group 4s, the new Memphis, 108.7. Very, very sharp product. The old Nashville's rolled in at 105.9, so we have a very solid Group 4 lineup. And the to cap her out at the end, we have the Dallas is at 111.2%. So
It's insane.
we have a very, very solid package. I kind of wanted to highlight some of the newer ones and some of the old ones that have been in there for a long time. This will be attached in the notes for the show today, as well as on the website. And then I have the 2021 data, and I renamed some of the experimentals to what we actually put them in the book as for this coming year. So you can kind of look at 2 years worth of data from the MS Tech side and see the consistency and the high yielding attributes to a couple of the products that we have in the lineup.
Awesome.
So, Turk, what do you got this week?
Markets still are just kind of in a stalemate, waiting for big news one way or another, where the trend seems to be drifting lower, but it only takes one major announcement from somewhere that is going to spark this thing. We're really in a holiday trading period where people are just kind of not paying attention. There's not a lot of trade activity going on. Volumes are low, and we typically always see that during the holiday. But things will pick up toward the end of the year here in the next 30 days or so. So be ready and be thinking about your marketing plan and where we still have very profitable levels, despite of the higher priced inputs, and in some cases inputs are coming down, but we still have very profitable levels. Be thinking about where you want to start your selling if you haven't started already. But the opportunities are going to come. You have to be ready to take advantage of them.
Absolutely. As we look forward, there's definitely profitable levels to be locking in and making sure we have all of our inputs paid for next year, for a year out. So,
Yep.
Well, Lynn, I think you were tasked again this week with covering Joe's corny joke of the week to wrap us up. What do you got for us this week?
All right. Why are pigs such bad drivers? Because all they do is hog the road.
Yeah.
And the second one, since this will be airing post Thanksgiving, if you don't take a nap after Thanksgiving dinner, could you be charged with resisting arrest?
Well, that'll wrap us up. Thank you for everybody for tuning in. I hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving, and we will catch you next week.